If I had listened to Miss Miriam that night and stayed inside after dark, 2 people might still be alive today. I only understood that 12 days later. By then, I was already in the hospital. The evening news was on the television. The anchor was talking about 2 missing people, a young woman and a 16-year-old boy. Police had been searching for them for several days, and I sat there thinking about one thing only. I knew where they were. But I said nothing. My name is Nate Parker, 25 years old, architectural firm in Chicago. In October of last year, I was sent on a work trip to West Virginia, a small settlement called Cinder Creek. Old church, photograph it, describe it, write a report. It was a job for an intern, but the intern got sick, so I went. Bus to Charleston, a ride with an old man who dropped me at a crossroads without a word, and a farmer who drove me to the village and also didn't speak. My phone signal died an hour before I arrived. Cinder Creek appeared from around a bend, a few dozen wooden houses along a single road, an old general store, a church on a hill, dense forest on all sides. The concrete head frames of abandoned coal mines stuck up in the distance like broken teeth. It was 5 minutes to 6 in the evening. I know that precisely because I checked my watch at the exact moment I noticed the street emptying. Not gradually, all at once, as if someone had given a signal. Doors closing, one after another, shutters, curtains. It was almost 2 hours before dark. Miss Miriam met me at the gate, a small, elderly woman in an apron, a warm smile, warm hands. She took my bag, led me inside, fed me dinner. The house was old, clean, and simple. A narrow bed, wooden floors, a window looking out onto the garden. Beyond the garden, the forest. After dinner, I asked, "Miss Miriam, is there a bar around here? A cafe? Somewhere people go in the evenings?" She didn't answer right away. She set her cup down on the table, slowly. "No, there's nothing like that here. Everything closes early. People eat at home and rest." "Why?" Miss Miriam paused before answering. "Bears come out of the forest at night." She said it calmly, as if explaining something completely ordinary. "This is a wildlife reserve. Hunting is banned. There are too many bears now. During the day, they avoid people, but at night, they can walk right up to the road." She finally looked at me. "We've been used to it for a long time. After dark, nobody goes outside unless they have to." I nodded. It sounded perfectly reasonable. That's exactly why I believed her. The first day I worked at the church, a white wooden building on a hill. Sound foundation, cracks in the walls, the roof needed replacing in several places. I photographed everything and took measurements. Locals stopped by to see what I was doing. Friendly, talkative. But no one stayed longer than 5 minutes. Each time, a glance at the sky, they remembered something, they left. The general store closed at 5:30. It was almost 3 hours before dark. On the second day, I noticed something else. The moment I approached a group of people, their conversations stopped. Not rudely, they smiled, but the subject changed immediately, or someone found a reason to leave. I tried talking to a woman outside the store. She answered normally, the weather, the roads, work, but when I asked how long she'd lived in Cinder Creek, she looked at something over my shoulder, nodded, and walked home. I turned around. Wade Cutter was standing by the road. Tall, lean, around 60. He was looking at me. Not at her. At me. On the third day, he approached me himself. I was working on the south side of the church, measuring a crack in the foundation. The shadow from the hill was already creeping down toward the village. Cutter appeared from the direction of the old cemetery. Without a sound, he stopped close. He smelled of machine oil, old leather, and salt, coarse gray salt. His eyes were nearly colorless. He didn't wait for me to say anything. He just spoke. His voice was flat and dry. Miriam explained the evening rules to you. Good things get done in daylight. After dark, stay inside. You heard the words, but you didn't understand them.
You people come from cities and think rules are for fools. You think if a door has a lock, you're safe. Door locks keep out people, son. There are no people here after dark. Only us and what belongs to this place. Don't ruin our Saturday. One extra sound, and it all starts again. I wanted to ask him about the bears, but Cutter raised his hand. His palm showed old white scars, long ones, 3 on each side, the kind left from grabbing something sharp, or from something holding you. He stood for a moment and walked away. That evening, on my way back to Miriam's, I spotted him at the corner of our street, standing and watching the windows of her house. When I looked back half a minute later, he was gone. On the 4th day, carts appeared near the store, wooden with high sides, iron-rimmed wheels. Several people were loading supplies: cornbread, potatoes, eggs in baskets, ham, wrapped pies. A lot. Clearly more than one family needed. The goods were packed tightly and covered with canvas. Then the carts rolled off toward the forest. Not toward any farms, not toward any houses. Toward the forest. I asked a man standing nearby where they were taking it. He looked at me, then at the carts, then back at me. Storage, he said. Winter supplies. Through the forest, in October, on wooden carts. On the 5th day, I saw the bull. Young, black, on a thick rope. 2 men were leading it, not toward a pasture, not toward a slaughterhouse. In the same direction the carts had gone. The animal fought them, snorted, dug its hooves into the mud. The rope was pulled taut. The men didn't shout at it. They just dragged it silently toward the trees. That evening, I asked Miss Miriam about the preparations for Saturday. She was standing at the stove, and her hand stopped in midair. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The cart's full of food? The bull? Everyone is preparing something. The whole place is focused on one thing." She set the spoon down and turned to face me. "Nate," she said. Her tone was firm and very serious. "Stay home Saturday night. Do you hear me? Don't go near the windows." "Miss Miriam, I was just asking about the event." "Do you hear me, Nate?" I nodded to show that I understood. She turned back to the stove and continued her work. I could hear the metal spoon hitting the rim of the pot as she cooked. On Saturday night, I woke to voices. The rain had just stopped, and water dripped from the eaves. Outside, there were many lanterns moving down the road. People in long, dark, hooded cloaks were walking along the street in silence. They had the carts of food and the same black bull on a rope. The whole procession moved toward the forest slowly and without a single sound. My mind told me to stay in bed, and I remembered the scars on Cutter's hands. I remembered Miriam's hands, too. But my curiosity was stronger, and it buzzed in my head. What was happening didn't fit inside any normal explanation. I stepped into the hallway. Miss Miriam's bedroom door was ajar, and her bed was empty. The sheets were still warm. The one person I had almost trusted was out there in that procession. That removed the last of my hesitation. Staying alone in an empty house, wondering what was happening outside, was unbearable. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed my notebook and phone, and slipped out through the back door. The procession disappeared into the trees. I followed along the wet grass, staying out of the lantern light. The path dropped into a ravine, slippery slope. A stream at the bottom, wet stones. I crossed it and soaked my boots. Beyond the stream, a climb. Old stone steps cut into the hillside, overgrown with moss. I scrambled up in the dark. When I reached the top, I saw the clearing. A rectangular opening cut into the hillside, the mine entrance. Old, rotting timber on either side. The ground around it was worn flat, not from tonight, from years. People were quickly and silently laying food in rows just outside the entrance. No words, no ritual phrases, just work that had been done many times before and was done well. The bull was tied to a tree at the entrance. Then someone gave a quiet command. Everyone began to leave, quickly, as if they knew exactly how much time they had. I was left alone. I should have left with them. Instead, I moved closer to the mine entrance. The first thing I felt was the stench. It twisted together with the smell of damp and coal dust. It was like meat left too long somewhere warm. I shone my phone along the wall beside the entrance. Bones. Small ones. Birds, rabbits. Larger ones. Empty baskets, the same kind as those brought tonight. On a wooden beam, deep gouges. Long, uneven, made by something wide. Rusted buckets along the wall. Inside them, dried salt. Then, a sound came from inside the mine. Heavy footsteps, slow and dragging, as though something enormous was climbing the angled floor out of the darkness. They stopped. Silence. Then again. Closer. I killed my phone light and threw myself into the thick brush at the edge of the clearing. I pressed flat and barely breathed. A figure emerged from the shadow of the mine. It was a humanoid creature, massive and hunched, yet unnaturally tall and powerfully built. Its head hung almost level with its shoulders. A bare skull. A short, thick neck. From beneath the rags of old clothing, a heavy body was visible. Long arms with bony fingers and sharp claws hung almost to its knees. It moved heavily, sideways, unevenly, like something that had lived too long in darkness. The figure stepped out into the clearing and stopped. Moonlight fell across a pale face. Unnaturally small eyes set deep in the skull. The creature drew a long breath through its nose, slowly turning its head from side to side. It ignored the baskets of food entirely. It stepped directly toward the tied bull. The animal thrashed in panic, but the creature seized it instantly. Clawed hands drove into the black hide, and with savage, impossible ease, it tore the young bull apart. Blood poured. The crack of bone and flesh was sickening. The shock of it made me gasp. My foot slipped on the wet ground. A thick, dry branch snapped under my boot. The sound was sharp and clear. The creature stopped tearing, went still, then slowly turned its head toward the brush. I ran, straight into the dark, not choosing direction. Behind me, an inhuman roar. It cut off. 1 second of silence. Then, footsteps. Heavy, but impossibly fast. The creature was right behind me. The speed was impossible for something that size. I weaved between the trees, but the snapping of branches was getting closer too fast. Then, something jerked me backward. A clawed hand locked around my ankle. I hit the ground face first. Terror was absolute. The force dragging me was total. There was nothing I could do. The creature flipped me onto my back and pinned me down. I felt pain instantly. Sharp claws drove into my right forearm, tearing through the jacket and the skin. Blood came before the shock did. The thing hung above me. Saliva mixed with the bull's blood dripped from its mouth. A clawed hand reached for my throat. Then, a burst of light. Beams from several powerful lanterns cut out of the darkness. Something white scattered across the ground and across the creature itself. Coarse salt. It hit its torn hands, its chest, its face. The creature screamed. It recoiled, staggering 2 steps back. It lasted only a few seconds. Hands grabbed my collar and dragged me across the mud. Then, I lost consciousness. I came to in Miss Miriam's room. My arm was tightly bandaged. She and Cutter were standing over the bed. There was no relief on their faces, only a heavy, quiet contempt. "Should have left you out there," Cutter said flatly. "You leave in the morning." He walked out and closed the door. Miss Miriam stayed. She looked at the bandaged arm for a long time without speaking. I asked her quietly to tell me the truth. She sat on the edge of the chair and began to speak. Her voice was cracked. More than 100 years ago, something terrible happened at the mine. An explosion. A distant shaft collapsed with the crew still inside. 17 men trapped underground. They couldn't be reached. The aftershocks kept coming. A local preacher, Jacob, took a lantern and went down through an old ventilation shaft. He said he needed to comfort the dying and pray with them. The whole community tried to stop him. He didn't listen. Jacob never came back up. The shaft caved in too. Everyone assumed they were dead. But 2 months later, an inhuman wailing began rising from under the ground. The collapsed mine had become a trap. No food, no light, and poisoned air. The men sealed alive went mad from starvation. The devout preacher could not die a holy death. In that darkness, something terrible began. They tore into one another for drops of blood. Jacob was the strongest. He survived because he ate the others, one by one. The sin of what he did underground burned out his mind, and something living in the depths of those shafts changed his body. When he finally broke his way out, it was no longer Jacob. A tall, muscular creature that had lost its human shape, and it wanted only meat. They tried to kill it. Bullets did nothing. Axes didn't stop it. Only coarse salt, as a symbol of purification, could drive it back for a few seconds. No more. Then someone thought to bring a carcass and baskets of food to the mine entrance. The creature fed and went back underground. Since then, a grim arrangement had held. Feed the preacher every Saturday. While he is fed, he stays inside. Miss Miriam went quiet. The old woman's eyes darkened with tears that didn't fall. She looked again at my wounded arm. Her voice became cold and flat as she told me the rest. The old people used to say that if the preacher ever tasted human blood again, ordinary food would no longer be enough. The hunting would begin. In the morning, Cutter drove me to the highway, despite my fever and weakness. Miss Miriam was working in the garden as I left. I called out, "Goodbye." She heard me, but she didn't turn around. Cutter dropped me at the crossroads without a single word. A passing car got me to the hospital in Charleston. The wound on my forearm was cleaned, closed, and stitched. They gave me heavy antibiotics. When the surgeon asked what happened, I answered him clearly. A large bear attacked me in the forest. He examined the deep parallel cuts for a long time, clearly doubtful, but he didn't argue. The next 12 days were bad. The fever wouldn't break. Inflammation, severe pain, and long stretches of half-conscious delirium. On the 12th day, sitting in the hospital room, I saw the breaking news on the television. A woman from the county seat had gone missing 2 weeks ago. Shortly after, a teenager on a bicycle disappeared too. A large search of the area found nothing. Where they were was not a mystery to me, but I said nothing to the police. There was no point. The following Saturday had already passed. The residents of Cinder Creek had gone back to the old mine and left their supplies at the entrance, as always. There was only one question now. Is it still enough? Or does the preacher need something different now? Sometimes old rules exist not to frighten strangers. Sometimes they remain because someone once didn't listen, and everyone else paid the price. I didn't listen, and now the preacher knows the taste of human flesh again.